for joining us today. Sorry we were a little bit late. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but I think we've got it sorted now. I'm so excited for today. We've got 4 Dragonblade authors. There were 4 releases this week of fantastic books. So we have Jade Lee with us, and Maeve Greyson, and Emily EK Murdoch, and Meara Platt. And I have a feeling that I'm just going to be able to stay out of the way and let the ladies talk this week. I'm very excited about this chat.
Nope, we're all going to be completely silent.
That's right.
No, we've already done 15 minutes of chatting. I know you guys know how to talk. So let's go ahead and start with this week's first release, which was Maeve's book, which was Loving Her Highland Thief, which has the most gorgeous cover ever, and is the first book in a brand new series, and has the highest stakes of any tagline ever. She can either go back to the life she's known, but if she does, she has to leave the love of her life, and it's just nothing better than that one. So
gorgeous cover.
Yeah, it is a gorgeous cover.
Dar Albert is the best cover artist. She's just fantastic. And she always captures, it's like she looks inside my head, which would be a scary place to go, but she always captures exactly how I see my characters. She's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. But yeah, Loving Her Highland Thief is book 1 of the Time to Love a Highlander series. And actually all the books of this series are linked by Scotland. Scotland is really the main character of all these books because it's kind of like a geographical matchmaker. Kinsey, she travels back in time because she's chasing this very expensive ram that she has bought for her farm into a cave. And when she comes out on the other side, turns out she's in the 13th century, but it takes her a little while to discover that. Yeah. And so each book, though, will, like book 2 is a waterfall, book 3 is a lock. So it carries on that way. So, but I'm excited for everyone to meet Kinsey and Matthias.
So one of the things that you said in your blurb is that she misses her toothbrush and her coffee, and I was thinking about what are the things that I would miss if I went back in time, and I think coffee is pretty much like at the top of the list.
Absolutely,
but, yeah.
Absolutely. Like in one scene, it's the morning after she has been there the first day, and she wakes up, and you know how you got that morning mouth and the bunk on your teeth, and it's like, well, so she resorts to going to a stream and rubbing on her teeth, and of course the men, the Highlanders, they can't figure out what she's doing, and she gives them a quick lesson in dental hygiene. So
as one does.
I think I would miss my coffee and definitely the toothbrush.
Shampoo is on my list.
Yeah. Yes.
Without the squeaky feel in your hair from soap, especially homemade soap. So.
And deodorant. Yeah. I mean, you just think of all the things that history probably didn't smell as good as right now. So.
Chewing gum. Like, he'd have to be a pretty good Highlander to get me to give up chewing gum.
Exactly.
And I'd want a roll of toilet paper, I think.
Oh, yes. Yes, because, leaves, especially depending upon the time of year, that'd be rough business right there.
And he'd have to be an exceptional Highlander. So, I'm gonna assume that he is.
Oh, absolutely. Matthias is a fantastic guy. He's the typical alpha male, but the biggest thing that upsets him is when Kinsey gets really angry, she cries. And of course, that makes her even angrier because she doesn't want people to think she's unhappy. She's just mad.
Yeah.
Well, when she starts crying, he just, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It just really bothers him for a woman to cry. So he has a soft side too.
Oh, cool. Well, that's the first book in a brand new series. And then our next release for the week was Jade's book, which is Lionhearted, which is part of the Lion's Den Connected World. And
yes.
You kicked off that series.
Yeah, I actually have this. Oops, here, we'll put it there. That's the first book of the series. And I wrote the abacus woman. She sits in the cage at the gambling home. She's got a veil and she sits there and she does all the accounting for the shop or for the den. And she generally speaks at a whisper. So all the men think she's fascinating, but she's a Chinese woman in London. If she can't get into, she's got a great situation, she's got a job, but that's not actually living. And so Mrs. Dove Lyons arranges for her to go off to Cornwall. And she's like, what am I going to do in Cornwall? Well, she's going to paint. And the hero actually is an art dealer. And cool. Yes. And he sees her, initially he sees her in Hyde Park. He's never really seen Chinese brush painting. And so, this is great, but she's with good reason, she's afraid of much of life. And he brings her out of her shell. She learns to trust him. She decides to make, okay, we will try this thing. But then it all culminates in this big scene in front of Prinny, because he needs Prinny's support. And it all goes down to, can he sell this painting to Prinny? And Prinny's actually more interested in this Chinese woman who's really cute.
As you are. Yeah, it's like I'm more interested in the person than the painting too. So
there you go. It occurred to me with all the new focus on diversity, I am half Chinese. I've got, if we're going to bring more diversity into the world or into our fiction, then I should maybe try that. And so they recommend. Catherine really wanted it. She really wanted a Chinese woman in the lion's den, and then she wanted me to write her story. So I was like, okay.
Oh, that's so cool. So what was it like revisiting the series since it's been so many books?
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's a gorgeous world, and it's just fun to say, where can I go next?
Yeah. The setup for it is really, it opens itself up to so many different stories to be told, which is really cool. Awesome.
It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. I had no idea that there was such a thing as an abacus woman until I started working on the ads for the book, and it was like that was a cool thing to learn too. So.
Well, actually, and it's at that time, most of the shopkeepers did their work on abacuses or I don't know how to plural that. But someone sitting there doing the click clack, they're actually commentary in about the click clack in the merchant, the back of the merchant homes or the merchant houses, because they had to do all their accounting by hand. But so it's not as unusual for them as it would be for us to have someone sitting there doing an abacus. But I thought it was cool. So there you go.
It's very cool. It's very cool. So Emily's book was the third book that released this week, and it's in a different series for you. It's in the Governess Bureau series, and it's a governess of many languages.
Yes, so it's my newest series with Dragonblade Governess Bureau. Miss Vivian Clark has set up the Governess Bureau to provide governesses for the nobility of England and Ireland, with, of course, 3 rules. They've got to be spectacular governesses, they've got to come with a special skill, and they must not fall in love. Now, 2 of the rules
so of course they're going to fall in love, right?
2 of those rules are very easy to follow. The third one, most of my governesses have a little bit of a problem with, and that's very much the setup for the whole series. In this book in particular, A Governess of Many Languages, Miss Elizabeth Fletcher is my heroine. She's quite young, but she looks younger than she is, so she's often underestimated, and that really gets her back up. But the best thing, of course, that she speaks French pretty much fluently. And she doesn't advertise this fact because it's always good to have a little bit of extra knowledge in the back of your pocket. And she is hired almost as a joke by Stuart Morton, who's Lord Galcrest, for his friends. They've been bickering, and he thinks that all I have to do to solve this marriage with my friends is to get a governess. What could possibly go wrong? And of course, many things go wrong. Much hilarity ensues, house parties, mischievous children, twins, and missing individuals that all get very, very busy. It's one of my longer books because there was so much going on, but it was incredibly fun to write because I don't know if this is a Regency problem. I've written medieval, I've written Regency, and I find with a lot of Regency that I've written, it's balls and card parties and going out here and walks there, and there's lots of characters, and that's all fun and great. But actually the intensity of a closed house where you see the same people every day, you have to learn to live with each other. You have to try and keep your own secrets and see if you can find out someone else's to make sure that you've got a little bit on them. There's a level of intensity there that I'd never explored as an author. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. Most people in the Regency period would spend 10 months of the year at home with the same people, with the same neighbors, the same squabbles. Then they spend a couple of months during the season with everybody else. And so one of the fun things that you have in this book in particular and in this series is that these are people who already know each other quite well. And then you thrust a governess into a situation. And she doesn't know the full story. She doesn't know who's telling the truth. She doesn't know what's going to happen next. And that, for me, is incredibly fun. And I hope it's fun for readers as well.
Yeah. And the shift in power dynamic, too, because she's coming into a situation without being the person in power in the situation. So,
and it's really odd governesses. I've always wanted to write a governess story, and I had ended up with so many that I decided to make it a series because you're kind of a servant, but you're also really educated and you're paid a relatively good salary.
Mm-hmm.
You also interact with the family a huge amount more. So you're above the maids and the footmen. You're kind of a level of respectability of maybe the housekeeper or the butler or the steward. But you spend so much time with the family and you have power over the children of the family, but you're not the family and you're not a guest. You know, you're not there to have a good time. You're there to work. So it's a really unusual situation that, you know, a lot of women found themselves in hundreds of miles from home. And, you know, to be quite honest, back in the day, you know, so you could probably hear from my hopefully delightful accent, I'm English. I lived just outside of Bath, Jane Austen's Bath. You know, 10 miles was a really long way. 10 miles wasn't a distance you could just decide to travel today. It's weird being kind of locked in your own home in a pandemic's kind of given me this understanding of actually the biggest town nearest me, Bristol, was in a different set of COVID rules than I was, so I couldn't go.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was only down the road. I could be there in less than 30 minutes, but I wasn't allowed to. And this gave me this idea of actually, if I was a governess serving in a home that was 20 miles from my family, I couldn't just visit them for the weekend. It would be practically quite difficult to get there. And I'd have to have money and means and permission. And it's just a very interesting microcosm of Regency and I guess Victorian life where you're kind of on your own. And that's what's so interesting about Elizabeth is that she's very much on her own. She's not wanted by her master and mistress because they didn't hire her. Lord Galcrest thinks it's hilarious and very much leaves her to her own devices. But because she speaks French as well as English, she starts to overhear these things going on in the household and realizes there's a lot more going on than perhaps even Lord Galcrest first assumed.
Cool. That's a very exciting setup. Plus, there's the whole language of love thing, too, which is...
the metaphor was right there. I literally...
That was one of the charming things about the tag, too, so for that one. Awesome. Meara, you're on book 12. That's a lot of books.
In the series, yes.
For the Journey of Love, and that releases today. It's brand new and out today. And it's book 12 in the Book of Love series, right?
Yeah, so this is just this, you know, it's built this core group of readers that just love these books and thank God that they do. You know, this is basically, it's a silly premise. These girls, it started off, the first books were, you know, was The Look of Love. And that was when the first heroine just had this book happen to drop on her head as she's browsing in the bookstore. And of course, it's the Book of Love. So here's the debutante and worried about who she's going to find on the marriage mart. And so she's decided she and her friends are going to read this book and get the inside scoop on all that's happening. And as each one in turn falls in love, they're passing the book around like the traveling pants. And yeah. And so this is what happens. So now, the journey of love. We've got Cami Farthingale, and that's another thing. The Farthingale heroines. For some reason, I have this series of Farthingale heroines who they're fun. They want to be traditional, but they're just not. Things just happen to them. They're just going to be walking down the street and something's going to happen and they're going to get into trouble. And they're just a lot of fun. It's a big, lovable, big fat family, and everybody meddles. Everybody has an opinion. And so it's just a fun, it's a fun group. And then I have these heroes these Braden men who are like these big, hunky, military, gladiator types. And they just fall hard. They're going to fall hard for these Farthingales. And so we have another matchup of Lorcan Braden, who's just this big, silent, scary-looking agent of the crown, and he's completely in love with Cami Farthingale. And she's got secrets. She actually has, which will come out through later in the story, as the story progresses. She actually has like a PTSD from having been attacked, and she never told anybody. It wasn't a sexual attack; it was an attempt at one. But this was a cruel guy who ended up, she got hurt. She got physically hurt. She hid it. She hid it from her family. She hid it from everybody. And now, as she finds love with Lorcan, it starts to come out. The truth starts to come out, and she's finally able to face what's going on. So the whole premise is that, the story starts out is that she's being told she has to go to London and be on the marriage mart, and it's just like it just scares her because the person who attacked her was a lord, and so she just does not want to face any of this. And people think she's childish and she's just silly. When it comes time to it, she runs off. Lorcan goes after her at the request of her family, and he's an agent of the crown, and he always gets his mission done. So, he's not thinking anything of it other than she's just being childish and needs to come back, needs to be brought back. But as the time goes on and they're thrown together, and of course they don't get back in time, and they have to spend time in an inn overnight together. So he's ready to marry her. That's it. But
I love the idea of him being protective, and as he's protective, she gets to be stronger because she gets to actually lean into the truth of what happened to her too. So
yes, and like just having his support, and there's like a lot of support, like in little ways. She's beautiful. She's a beautiful girl, and so people see that beauty and they stop right there. They don't know anything about her. They don't know her talents. They don't know her ideas, her thoughts, or anything. But he, being in love with her, falling in love with her, he actually, and just being the kind of guy that you adore, he wants to know more about her. And as she opens up to him, she realizes she does gain the strength to face what happened, to reveal to her family what happened, and that they go forward and be able to do something with this, with this lord who's basically been doing, attacking women at will because of this privilege of peerage that I guess actually was a thing, and eventually laws were enacted to remove the peers from this kind of immunity that they had to basically do whatever they wanted. So so here we are, and that's basically the story. And I just wanted to say, I read Jade, I read Maeve, I read Emily.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I love your books. I love the stories, and I haven't picked up Emily's yet. This latest one just came out, but I'm getting it.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't know about all of you, but I wanted to join Dragonblade for two reasons. Number one, Violet around. I'd heard such incredible things about how she worked as an editor with people, and I knew that I wanted to take my writing to the next level, and I knew I'd need a really good editor to challenge me to get me to that next level. And everywhere Violet around, so I was like, okay, who is this woman? Where can I find her? And it was Dragonblade. But this book, we have so many incredibly talented people, and I'm yet to find a book I didn't like.
Yeah.
As you know, it's a really lovely company to put your energy behind, because the idea of nurturing authors' careers and bringing out the best possible book is something that it's really easy to, it's really easy to put your energy behind. It's something that feels really good to do. And when you pick up a Dragonblade book, you're going to get something that's well curated, that's well executed. The covers are beautiful, the packages are beautiful, the premise is right, the writers are fantastic. You guys are great to work with. It's something that's really lovely to put your energy behind.
It's more like family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
So, Meara, you talked about him actually seeing, about the hero actually seeing the heroine, and Jade, you had talked about your heroine being somebody who was a little bit mysterious, spoke in a whisper and kept herself shrouded and stuff. One of the interesting things that's come out of the Universal Fantasies book that came out this past week too was this idea of actually being seen. And I think that's a Beauty and the Beast kind of thing too, and a Dirty Dancing thing, that when the hero actually sees the heroine for who she is, or when the heroine can see the hero for who he is, that kind of love that comes with that identity essence thing, I think is so incredibly strong. And you can tell from listening to y'all talk this week, it transcends even time periods, with Maeve's book, that where she goes back to the 13th century, right?
18th century Scotland.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that idea that seeing things that everybody else doesn't see, that are new things, it's a very cool, very, very seductive thing, I think. So, are there any themes that you guys really like to read, or that you really like to write? Is there any tropes that really appeal to you, or anything that really catches you? I know, Emily, you had said about wanting to write about governesses.
I always love a good time travel.
Yay! I like time travel best, I think. I've written historical and shifters, and paranormal, but I do think time travel is my favorite, because you can have so much fun with it by creating just total confusion between the hero and the heroine.
Yeah.
And
I'm starting to branch out more into more aspects of the Regency, not just, I've always wanted to do more than just the ball gowns and the ballrooms, but, bringing in some of the middle class, the rising middle class, and just people of different backgrounds and different social classes. They may or I haven't quite done the impoverished servant, the really low boot black who falls in love with, but I'm stretching the social classes.
Mm.
I'm trying to stretch kind of backgrounds, but not necessarily classes. We Brits, we get very funny about class. So in a previous Dragonblade book, I've had, blue stockings, which are very, very popular, but I've had kind of historical real people. So I had Caroline Herschel in one of my books.
Good for you.
She was an astronomer and a scientist in her own right, and she was often poo-pooed because her brother was the famous one. He was the Sir William. But she discovered a huge amount in her own name. She was the first woman to be, accepted as a scientist by trade. And she was German, and she came over to England because that was where a lot of the money was to, live off that side, of science. And I just have her as a character because I think actually, blue stockings are great. Love a good blue stocking. I will read a blue stocking every day of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really fun to play with fictional characters, but there were real women who were doing these things. there were real people who were pushing these boundaries and challenging things. And so I have a really fun conversation with her and my hero in that book, which is always the blue stocking from my previous series, where he kind of goes, oh, well, women, he's got no idea who she is. They got no, they're best in the kitchen, that's where they belong. And she's kind of like, and she takes him to task.
Mm-hmm.
And, she points out, I'm taking you to task in my second language, by the way. You think you're so clever. I really like that area of, historical romance that features real people and gives you that glimpse into people that actually existed and actually lived.
I saw a reminder just the other day that Jane Austen wrote about regular people. She didn't really, now you can hardly publish a book where he's not a duke. and so, and if you look at the dukes of that time, of the Regency, at least they weren't really all that attractive.
I don't recommend. I did a talk actually at the Historical Novel Conference this year called "Not a Duke Again," and it was a craft talk of how can we as historical writers bridge that gap between readers seem to only want dukes, but if we only give them dukes, how can we tell? Because if we just keep giving them dukes, then
because we don't know what we want all the time,
No, so I kind of challenge people to be like, actually, what is it about dukes that we love? Is it the power? Is it the money? What is it? Can we put that in a different type of character? Which is why I think spies are so popular, because there's that mystery and power and intrigue, and you don't need a title to do that.
I think the dukes are basically the modern day billionaires that women just love to read, and that's
and that ties into the whisk you out of your regular life kind of thing. Somebody who can sweep you away. And I don't know about anybody else, but right now I really want to be swept away. I want to be swept away all the time, over and over and over and over again, because this has all gotten to be a bit much. And so we can escape for 5 or 6 hours into a story and go to some place I haven't been before, see something I haven't seen before. And do it while I'm drinking my coffee. That's exactly what I'm looking for.
There you go.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, like with my husband, of course, who's actually very supportive, but he always has the comment too, is like, don't they get tired of reading this book of love stories? How many times can you look at it? But the fact is, it's like, it's something, it's familiar, it's going to be fun. It's like, everybody, it's like you're all just sitting there watching, and there's like this dollar bill that's sitting there on the street corner, and you're just watching who's going to come by and just scoop it up. But this is what the book is. It's like, all right, this big hunky guy is now just going to get hammered by love. That's it. And it's fun. And to watch these guys who want to, I'm not going to be caught up in it. I'm not going to fall in love. And of course, they fall madly in love. And it's just a fun thing. You want to be able to smile and laugh and just be taken out of the daily, life. Because everybody wants to think that there's this gorgeous, rich, handsome, powerful guy who thinks you're just wonderful and can't get enough of you.
Well, I read somewhere, I can't remember where, that if life was like action movies, men wouldn't watch them, and if life was like romance novels, women wouldn't read them. But as life is not like a romance novel, unfortunately for most of us, that's what we write.
But I think it does tie into that, to the idea of somebody who actually sees you too, because he's not going to only whisk you away; he's actually going to see who you are. And so it's a place where you can actually completely be yourself and be accepted for who you are is I think an incredibly seductive thing. We've lost Jade. I'm gonna keep messaging her and see if we can get her back. But until she comes back, can you all talk a little bit about the kind of research that goes into the books? I know, Maeve, you had to figure out what it would be like to go back into 13th century, and it'd be kind of cool to have to imagine yourself in that situation as a contemporary person.
Well, luckily now, of course, we have the internet, whereas before, when I first started writing over 20 years ago, you didn't have the internet to use for research. But also, I was fortunate enough, my husband and I went to Scotland about 10 years ago. and toured a lot of the castles and went to a lot of the places that I use in my books. And yay, she's back. So I try to be as historically accurate as possible. You know, of course, some things you're just not going to get, but and there's just so much information out there. It's kind of like, you've heard the term falling down a rabbit hole. Yeah. When you're doing research, I kind of have to set a timer, because if I don't, I could spend all day just looking up stuff. I've learned more about history now than I ever did in school. And I actually enjoy it now.
Well, and that's the thing, because it's alive now. Like when you're writing about it and researching it, it becomes alive for you, and it's not just sitting and memorizing it. I love that about Dragonblade books too, the idea that I can trust, like I can trust myself to go on the journey with you all, you know, and that if you're putting something in your books, I can trust that there's a reason for it to be there, and that it's, you know, something that I didn't know before that now I know. You know, it's like.
And I've got a great example of that in this book, actually, because my heroine, Elizabeth, has spent some time in France. That's why she speaks French so well. She's taken on the habit of smoking cigarettes, which was something very unusual for a woman, but did happen in France in very, very fashionable areas. Hadn't quite reached England at that point. And so I have her being discovered smoking a cigarette. It's very scandalous. It's very exciting. And my editor, Violetta, immediately picked me up on it. And she was like, no, you're 20 years too early. Cigarettes did not make it. And I was like, oh, yes, I'm kind of trying to make it a thing where she's ahead of the cut. Are we too ahead? How do we? And we have this back and forth. Like, does it make more sense if it's a cigar? Would she afford a cigar and a governess's salary? Okay, go back. What about a pipe? Where would she get a pipe from? How would she? And it's that level of detail. And it's brilliant. It's exhausting, but it's brilliant because I don't want a reader to look at it and go, oh, that doesn't. And you are immediately taken out of the story.
Yeah.
It's better for Violetta to catch it than for a reader to catch it.
And she's much nicer to me.
Yes, absolutely.
I had an issue where I had a whole pivotal scene in a park in London. And then I was like, just double check this. And the park wasn't founded until 100 years later.
Oh, don't you hate it when that happens?
I'll find another one. My favorite one is I often use just fake names. I just shove in a name to keep writing, and then I come back later and I make the name meaningful, or I check that I have it before. And I was writing again for a Dragonblade book. I was writing and I was like, I need a duke, just any duke. And I was like, okay, Charles Lennox. Charles Lennox is a great British name, sounds really English, brilliant. Duke of pick a London, Richmond, Duke of Richmond. The Duke of Richmond is a real thing, which I discovered later. And the Duke at the time of my book was Charles Lennox.
Wow.
This was very odds. I looked at it and I was like, am I him reincarnated? Is this what's happened? I picked that.
Was he a good guy at least, you know?
I was like, oh, this is a nightmare. So I had to change it. I was like, well, he can't stay that way because it's a real person. But again, I'm really relieved I checked. I'm pretty sure Violetta would have checked and let me know, but I'm really glad I checked because sometimes things just are too accurate to be allowed in a book.
At one point, I decided to give people names of the street I was on and in my neighborhood, just, throw out names. Found out a month later that Bedford, because I lived on Bedford Drive, was actually a real person. And in fact, the neighborhood had been named for English.
Oh, no.
Like, okay.
Well, that's the problem that, Americans will have is, New Hampshire is named New Hampshire because there was a Hampshire. I've lived in it. It's a lovely place. New York is New York. I've lived in York. Lovely place. But, you have all these things that are not always locations, and not every location has a dukedom, but there's quite a lot of crossover.
Yeah. In the Lion's Den story I just turned in, I had one of the characters, and because he was not the hero, he's the guy who the heroine does not want. And I gave him the name. It's a Scottish location, and then I went back to make sure that there was no,
Yeah.
there was no such character, at least not with that title, because I was really nervous about.
I've decided to start
Accidentally.
going with like elven names and
There you go.
dwarvish names.
And a whole slew of hobbits,
There we well, there's a website I use, fantasynamegenerator.com. And so
I've used that.
yes, they've got real names, but when I get frustrated, I just go, oh, give me a dwarven smithy.
I go with Celtic names. I love the old Celtic names.
I run out sometimes because this is book 44 for me. So like all the Williams and Charleses and Thomases, I've gone through those. But I do find, especially for surnames, and this is something that I haven't said before, so apologies if this is inappropriate world. I go onto websites of very posh schools in England like Eton, and I look at the previous alumni and I find surnames there because that's the best of the best. That's what they've been.
There you go.
I feel free to take that. If you are an author from Dragonblade or otherwise following this, it is a very easy way to find a lot of very upper class English surnames.
That makes sense. So we talked a little bit about leaving holes in your manuscript when you're writing to put in names. Do most of you plot your books out ahead of time? Do you know where they're going ahead of time? Do you start with characters, or do you go through the story? Jade is going to do a little bit of both, I think.
I know all the big romance moments. So I know like all the major plot points. I know we have to get here and I know how we have to get there. But every morning I get up with, well, he's got to realize such and such. How does this happen? I don't know. He gets hit in the head. No, that's not going to work.
Not a book falling on him, though.
No, well, I actually had that happen to me, and it created a series. I was in a library, or not a library, a museum shop, gift shop, and a book fell on my foot, and it ended up being the basis for a 6-book series.
You had a book of love moment.
I did.
That's the best.
Only it was a book about a tantric cult, but same idea.
Tantric cult, book of love,
Yeah, there you go.
All the same.
Potato. So Maeve, what about you? Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I do this wonderful little outline, and then while this character's going to do this in this chapter, and this chapter he's going to do this, and this chapter she's going to do this, and I get it all plotted out, and then as soon as I start writing, the feral little beasts just run off and do whatever they want. and then there it goes. And so then I have to go, well, since they did this, now this is going to have to go do this. So I guess I'm a combination, but I do try to plot.
Well, I think if you know too far ahead of time, it's not as exciting as if you're discovering it too. So
exactly.
No, and I think the best books are when the hero and heroine are like determined to, I'm not doing that, I'm doing this, and just make you go in that direction. Then that's like they're alive and they're and they'll sizzle, on the page.
I guess I kind of come at the opposite end of this. I'm a heavy plotter because I write in long series, so kind of 8, 10, 12. I've got a 14 one coming. If I'm not knowing where certain secondary characters need to be appearing or saying things or mentioning things, then I get to book 6 and I'm like, oh, okay. So no one's heard of this character. No one's going to care if they go missing or if they suddenly elope or if they do this. So I'm that terrible person where I let a book sit. I write out a 1 sentence for every chapter, and then I expand that sentence to a paragraph.
Oh, you are a heavy plotter.
Well, and then I do what I call a deep plot. So what I will do is I will write in present tense everything that happens in that chapter. So he says this, he walks over here, then he argues with the butler. The main argument is this. Then he goes over here. He has to make a deep plot is like 1,400 words is the plot.
Oh my goodness.
And then so I do all of that for all the chapters. And then that means that when I come and sit down, I know exactly beat for beat, sentence for sentence, paragraph for paragraph, what's going to happen. And I can do 3,000 words in an hour because I'm just doing it. I'm just following the steps that I've already set for myself.
And none of that lost wandering around in the dark feeling. No,
but I think part of it is because I have a full-time day job. So I don't have time to sit and go, oh, but where could they go? And for like, what could lunch be? And what did they discuss over lunch? And could this be the time? I'm like, no, I have 46 minutes until my day job starts and I need to get moving. So that's how I approach it. Who knows? Like, there have been times where I've got like a third of the way through a book. In fact, the next book in this series, so I won't say too much because I don't think it's even up on pre-order yet, but I got a third of the way through and I was like, this book would be about 1,000% better if this character was completely different to how I've written them.
Oh no!
It was a secondary character. It wasn't my hero, my heroine, but it was the hero's brother. And I suddenly was like, oh, but if he's agoraphobic, then they have to stay in the house, and all the intensity turns up by 1,000 because no one can leave these four walls.
I was 40,000 words into a book when I realized I had the wrong hero. And you spend so much time fighting to make sure it, and then I finally just had to toss it all in and start completely over.
Sometimes you just got to.
Yeah. That's bad. Now, I usually try to, before I put a word down, I usually try to have not only the hero and heroines, but their siblings, the families, and I really do try to listen to them in my head, because it has happened sometimes where I'm trying to pair a couple, a hero with a heroine, and one of them is just like, no,
thank you.
Just refusing, and I'm trying, but don't, no.
It's because they're real to us,
Yeah.
They exist. So
I think they're real to readers too. That was one of the things that there was a lecture not that long ago where they were talking about. She was talking about how real fictional characters are to us. I think because if I'm going to read your book, I'm going to go along with you for however many hours I'm with you. I will fall in love with the characters as they fall in love with each other. By the end, they, I care a lot more about them than I do people I don't know, because I know the people you wrote about, even though they're not really people.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Well, ladies, I think we're bumping up against a limit. I'm sorry we got a little bit late start, but this was just fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I'm going to go ahead, like always, and pop all the books links in the post that has the stream in it, so you'll be able to find them if you haven't gotten the books this week. What are you waiting for? Because there's so many good ones. I have Maeve's book on my Kindle waiting for me for this weekend.
Yay!
I also love it. I also love a good time travel romance. But it was so great for you. Thank you so much for being with us. It was so great to have you join us this week. We do have an announcement because we did do the Lunch with the Dragonblade authors giveaway. And what I'm hoping is that if we do this every Friday, that you as readers and as people listening in will get used to the fact that you can come here and spend your lunch hour with us if you're on the East Coast of the States, or coffee if you're on the West Coast, or
dinner if you're here.
Adult. If you're with Emily, you can have your first glass of Friday wine. But there will be a break that you'll get used as every week and have a chance to know your authors behind the books that you love. So our first giveaway winner is Lisa Sargent, and Lisa will get your gift cards out to you. So
congratulations, Lisa.
So, ladies, thank you so much for joining us. This was great. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us, and readers, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us too. We'll be back here the same time next week.
Thanks so much, Evelyn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.